So I'd like to begin this event with an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation upon whose ancestral land our city campus now stands. I would also like to pay respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for this land. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's event of the Graduate Certificate in Writing, Editing, and Publishing Showcase. My name is Kenny, I'm from the Domestic Recruitment Team, and I'll be your MC for tonight. For those joining us online, I extend my welcomes and thank you for attending tonight's event. In tonight's sessions, we are joined by industry experts who will share their incredible insights into the world of the literary industry and provide advice on career opportunities. We are also joined by amazing alumni as well, who will share with us their inspiring success stories and what they have been up to since starting their degree. Today, we will discover exciting new projects as well within the industry. And finally, of course, the whole reason why we're here today is to learn about the course and what flexible options we have for future students. With all that covered, I am pleased to introduce our amazing guests for tonight's event. First, we have Delia Falconer, a senior lecturer in writing, editing, and publishing, and acting head in writing. She is an award-winning author of 4 books, including both fiction and non-fiction genres, including novels and thought-provoking essays. Dr. Delia has also contributed significantly to the literary industry, as a critic being awarded a Wakely Award in 2018 for arts criticism. She has also been a peer advisor and a judge for several prestigious awards, including the Age, Book of the Year, the Stella Prize, and the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Next up, we have Dr. Andrew Pipos, who is a lecturer in writing, editing, and publishing. He's a renowned writer of both fiction and narrative nonfiction, with his novel Luckies shortlisted for the 2021 Miles Franklin Literary Award. He holds a doctorate in creative arts from UTS and has been a valuable educator in both undergraduate and postgraduate programs. Andrew's works has been featured prominently in publications, and he has been a guest speaker at major literary events and conferences, including the Sydney's Writers' Festival and the Adelaide Festival. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Also joining us tonight is Jane McCready. Jane is an award-winning writer and journalist renowned for her insightful work on science and its impact on society. She's an author of Making Girls and Boys, Inside the Science of Sex, and edited the Best Australian Science Writing. Additionally, she founded the Quantum Words Festival, which celebrates science writing in Sydney and Perth. With a rich background as a former book publisher, Jane's impressive career includes serving as the CEO for the New South Wales Premier serving as the CEO of Writing New South Wales for 10 years until 2023, and until recently completing her term as a senior judge of the New South Wales Premier Literary Awards. Currently, she is pursuing a PhD in creative writing and the graduate certificate, and engaging in freelancing writing, curation, and public speaking. She's also teaching the industry-aligned publishing workshop subject in the graduate certificate program. Welcome, Jane. Thank you so much for coming to us tonight. And finally, we are joined by Amanda Esnaola Klafke. With over 7 years of experience in business strategy and project management, Amanda is currently serving as the co-founder and product manager at Perpetual Hire. Additionally, she is one of the current students in the UTS Writing, Editing, and Publishing program. Hello and welcome, Amanda. With our introductions complete, let us delve into the exciting world of writing, editing, and publishing. To kick things off, I would like to hear some of your insights on the Australian publishing industry and the current landscapes for writers and editors. Delia, would you mind expanding on that?
Well, I think to quote Dickens, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times for publishing at the moment. Certainly, people I've been speaking to in publishing are saying it is quite tough at the moment because of rises in production costs and rises in the cost of living, and that is what it is. But on the other hand, I can't remember the Australian writing scene being quite so dynamic, so diverse, so exciting. As I've, in my 20-something years of being in the writing world, it's really, there's lots of experimentation, there's lots of hybrid uh, exciting books and works being written. Non-fiction is booming. We have our literature is being noticed overseas. We have an Australian writer on the Booker Prize shortlist at the moment. If you've been looking at the prize lists, Australia's Indigenous writers are, sort of hitting it out of the park at the moment. So we have this great energy, and people who stay in the industry, really stay in because they love it, because it's a really dynamic and exciting industry to be in. The message that I have had from industry people about writing is that, and about working in the industry, is what they're looking for is flexibility. So, the traditional roles that used to have the differentiation between, a publicist and a, publisher and an editor and so on, those roles are getting increasingly blurred. So, they look for candidates who can bring a lot of life skills and a lot of work skills to the table, and bring a lot of enthusiasm. So flexibility, I think, is the path forward in publishing and editing and writing at the moment.
Brilliant. Jane, it's lovely to have you here this evening, and thank you so much for coming out. With a well-rounded experience in the industry, could you share your story about how you transitioned from writing to being a former editor and into publishing? And do you think it's rewarding for those looking to enter these fields to develop skills across different areas as well?
Yeah, I often feel as though my career has been a series of happy and unhappy accidents, honestly. I wouldn't say I've had a clear career strategy that I've followed. One thing's led to another thing. I've had a lot of good luck and a lot of bad luck along the way, as everybody does. I feel very fortunate that I've had such diverse experience across the industry. I've been a writer, I've been a publisher, I've led a major writing organisation, I've been a literary judge, as she said. I've worked as an editor and as a translator as well. All of those things have taught me skills that have been useful in all of the others, and they've all been enriched by the other things that I've done. That said, I don't think it's necessary for people to work in every aspect of the industry. If you want to be a writer and that's really what you want, you don't have to work as a publisher. What I do think you need to do, though, if you want to build a career as a writer, is you need to really understand the publishing industry. And it is, as Delia said, an incredibly dynamic, exciting, creative industry, but it is also a very low-margin industry, particularly in Australia, where our population is small. So our readership is therefore small. It is really tough to make a book viable financially in our market. And publishers often say that 20% of the books that they publish support the other 80%, because it's pretty hard. It's pretty tough out there, and salaries in publishing are low as well. And I think probably everybody knows that writers, generally speaking, don't make much money either. So financially, it's a very difficult and constrained field to be in, but there are many, many other rewards that come with it.
Would you say that the flexibility that Delia mentioned, is that something that we can definitely leverage to enhance this industry, especially in Australia, where it does seem to be struggling a little bit, but is that an advantage that we can definitely leverage for international?
Yeah, definitely it is. I mean, roles in every industry are changing, and new jobs are emerging all the time. It used to be in publishing that publicity and marketing were very separate fields, and that's no longer always the case. And obviously there are new marketing platforms emerging all the time. BookTok is now a really significant contributor to book sales in Australia, and that's been quite a rapid increase in quite a short time. I think if you want to work in publishing, probably the most, there's lots of advice I could give, but one piece of advice would be not to be too fixated on the job that you want in the end. So you might want to be a publisher, but you might start out as the receptionist or the admin assistant or, a writing publicity material or whatever it might be. But if you can get into a publishing house, opportunity, and you're good at your job and you work hard, opportunities will come to you. So not to be too concerned about what you do, but develop as many skills as you can that are relevant and be prepared to be very flexible about what you do. Yeah.
Fantastic advice. And I think it's a great segue into the next question would be for Dr. Andrew. Can you tell us about the diverse career opportunities available for graduates in the writing, editing, and publishing program?
There are pockets of expansion in the Australian publishing industry at the moment. So, for example, Simon & Schuster, one of the major multinational publishing houses in Australia, have established a new press called Summit Press, and they've acquired a small press firm with a project of expansion. So there's some good news around as well. UTS graduates have found work at publishing houses in editorial, marketing, publicity. Someone in the marketing department at my publisher, Pan Macmillan, is a UTS graduate. I can think of UTS graduates working at literary agencies, Curtis Brown and the recently established A4 literary agency. We don't specialize in script writing, but nevertheless, UTS graduates have written for soaps like Home and Away or dramas such as Mystery Road. And of course, UTS is known for graduates who are novelists. And we'll talk about some of those publishing successes later on.
I think I would like to definitely expand on that and go towards Amanda now. You've studied our program, and I believe that you're currently still in the graduate certificate program now. Could you tell us about your experiences so far and what do you enjoy most about the course?
Yeah, so I'm on the home stretch now. I have 2 assignments that I need a hand in this week, so that's exciting. And I'm really sad actually that it's ending. I've really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure what to expect coming into it. But I think one of my favorite things about it was just being around a bunch of different people that are all sort of working towards the same thing. And you have this baseline shared interest, which is typically writing or maybe it's editing. And so coming together in some of the writing subjects and doing something called workshopping, which was a foreign concept to me at the time. Basically, you hand in a written draft and then everyone reads your work and then you come back and you get feedback from everyone and your lecturer. And I think that was a very insightful experience, not just from the perspective of receiving feedback, but also giving feedback and listening to the feedback that other people were giving. And I think just as well, I think we forget our lecturers are published authors. And so being able to speak to these people and get their advice and guidance and encouragement was wonderful.
With your assignments, how would you describe your assignments? Are they more practical-based focus or are they more theory-based?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the majority felt very practical. A lot of it was, for me, a lot of my assignments were actually just doing the thing and writing. And then the professional editing subject that I did was very practical. We did one assignment was a copy edit, and then another assignment was a structural edit, and that was a fantastic experience. Yeah, so it was mostly practical, I would say.
Fantastic. Now, I understand that the program itself is co-designed with industry partners, allowing students to gain practical learning experience. And this is really the focus, and one of the perks of this degree is the fact that there is a lot of practicality in it. Could you kindly share how this collaboration happened and how it impacts on student experiences, learning, and career outcomes?
That question for me. Well, let's not forget that we're all industry people as well, and that is where we have a distinct difference from many other degrees where you might have one or disciplines where you might have, you know, one or two people who are publishing, and you know, we have all our, you know, our greatest asset, I think, is our people and our connections to industry. So, you know, we have. You know, our writers have been, you know, we're business people as well. We have active, busy, successful writing lives across many sort of genres and areas. And so part of that set of connections that we have has been the ability to, we've reaccredited this course last year, which means that we gave it a full sort of, you know, fitness test and a whole set of tweaks, and we were able to call on people in industry. So the head publisher of Penguin Random House, the CEO of a company that turns books into films, a senior publicist, a couple of other publishers. So we spoke to them to see what their needs were in industry, and that was very much where we received and so we have those sort of people that we can always call on. We can call on them to come in and visit classes as well. So we have that very strong industry connection, and the message from them was very much this message about, you know, we really value students who come out of programs like yours because they can think, and they can, you know, they have it's a people industry, so they have the cultural knowledge and the cultural skills, you know, that we are looking for as well. So one of the things that we did as part of that industry advice and connection was to we already have subjects. We have something called authentic assessment. So authentic assessment is where we design our subjects so that the end product is as close to something that you would send out into the publishing world anyway. So, for example, in the nonfiction subject that I take, the assignments are designed so that students can just send them out. We've had over 50 students in that subject. We get major publications in major literary magazines, newspapers, and so on. So that's sort of part of it. But what we did was also retweak the publishing course, which Jane has been teaching for us, where we made that as close to an intern-like experience as possible. So I'm sure Jane will speak about this, but students are getting industry people in, and they are to speak to them, and we've partnered with Ultimo Press, who are in our precinct, and so they actually hear from a publisher about their list, and they deliver a pitch to that publisher. So and perform other activities that they would and tasks that they would undertake in a publishing company, including the teamwork aspect, because it is very much a business of building relationships. Even as a writer, your relationships are super important.
That's fantastic. So essentially you'll be creating a portfolio through the graduate certificate as well. Jane, would you like to just continue on with the publishing?
Yeah, sure. So in Publishing Workshop, the students have been working in groups to put together a publishing proposal for a particular book. And as part of that, they've needed to prepare a marketing pitch for their colleagues in the publishing house to persuade them that this book should be published. They've needed to identify the audience, how many copies they think they can sell, what the price should be. They've done a brief for a cover designer, what the cover should look like. They've done an editorial brief on the manuscript and what changes might be made there, or if there are any issues that the manuscript poses. So they've prepared this whole document in the way that a publisher would do within a publishing house to go to an acquisitions meeting and persuade their colleagues that this book is viable and worth publishing. So it's been a very practical, hands-on experience for them. And as Delia said, they've had a number of industry guests coming in across the semester to learn from. So at the beginning of semester, they were all looking a bit shell-shocked and saying, but how do we do this? But by the end of semester, they all felt pretty confident that they knew how you would approach doing something like that.
I think something that's very important to know is that as students, we tend to have this mindset that everything needs to be theoretical, but the fact is that the skills that we learn, those are the real things that we actually need to apply later on in life. And the fact is that the graduate certificate program is designed to be as realistic as possible. It's just absolutely fantastic. Amanda, would you like to continue?
Yeah, actually, that got me thinking. I'm doing a subject at the moment which has been really insightful in the sense from the industry perspective. So we've had a lot of online Zoom classes, but meeting industry professionals from different states as well, and doing my final assignment at the moment. It's been a really reflective process because we've got to think about. We've got a project that we are working on, and we've got to think about where we could get that published and what publisher might want to publish that kind of story and why, and also thinking about our career as writers more broadly. As it's been discussed, it's not easy to make it as a writer, and so you kind of got to think creatively, which I guess that's one thing that we can already do, and find some other ways around. So it's been very good to go through that. And I remember before I had applied to come to UTS, I was looking at other courses available, and I saw there was one subject at a university that I won't mention, and it was like the writing life, how to be a writer, and there was a lot of what seemed to be theoretical subjects, and the thing that drew me to UTS was the practicality of everything. So yeah, it definitely lived up to that from my experience.
Fantastic. Now, I'm going to stick with you, Amanda. Would you mind telling us about the UTS anthology? What is that? And I've heard that you've done some work with it as well.
Yes. So we had the book launch last night. So the UTS annual writers anthology is a collection of short stories, a mixture of fiction, non-fiction, poetry, and sometimes scripts, written by UTS writers, UTS students. And yeah, so at the end of last year, I applied to be on the committee, not knowing what I was going to get myself into. And thank goodness for that. But it was last night we had the book launch at the State Library, and it was flawless. And Delia, I have to say thank you so much for thanking us. We didn't want to make the event about us, but for you to recognize like all the craziness, and to see it come out so flawlessly, I'm like, this feels like a lie, but it was great. And yeah, you guys can, if you're interested, you can buy I think you get a copy in your gift bags or something of last year's anthology, so you'll get a feel for it. But yeah, it was an amazing experience to work as a part of that editorial team. We all worked as editors with our own authors, and then we all had some other roles to fulfill as well, like organizing the launch. And it was just really amazing exposure to the end-to-end editing and publishing process, and just really nice to be able to work with an author on their own work. So, yeah.
Sounds very exciting. Delia, would you mind just building up on Amanda's point about the UTS anthology? Are there any other features of the graduate certificate that contribute to the success of the graduates? And how do we evaluate this?
Well, to go back to last night's event, which was just joyous, it was fantastic. Part of what students get out of the degree is they make connections not only with industry people but with each other. And you, as the editorial team, you will have that team of people that you have worked with well and that you trust and that knowledge that you carry forward, and you've got a whole cohort that you will carry forward. We have such loyal alumni from sort of over 40 years of this program running, that in the audience was a well-known Australian writer who was in the very first edition, edition 43, and she was there in the audience to support us. And we had students from other, from many who have kind of quite high profiles as a result of this degree, who also came to that event. And it was an event that was attended by the head of writing from Creative Australia, which is the new name for the old Creative Australia, the old Australia Council. And I guess that is actually just another positive thing about the writing situation at the moment that I didn't mention, is that we actually have, the government has come up with a cultural policy, the Commonwealth Government, and called Revive. And they are going to be creating a Writing Australia board. And so some of those issues that the writing community is looking at are hopefully going to be sort of resolved. So we had, a representative, we had the head of writing from there, we had the head of, one of the major publishing houses. So I think that's there's what you see on the page and in the brochure, and then there are those intangibles. And I think that it's that those sort of networks and connections that are, probably the in some ways the jewel in the crown of this of our writing programs.
I mean, writing is such a solitary activity, obviously. Creating community is really important. People that you can talk to about a problem that you've got in a story or something you just read. Story ideas, people who can read your manuscripts. And that's one of the things that students do at UTS. They build community.
Can I add to that? I talked about the workshopping experience earlier. And I think in almost every instance, I would go into that session hating what I'd written. And then all it takes is kinder eyes that are not yours to offer you a different perspective and then reinvigorate the writing process for you. So, yeah.
For those who, just building up on your point, for those who feel perhaps a little bit intimidated with even starting to write, do you have any advice? And I'd like all the panelists to contribute to this.
Do you want to go first, Andrew? I've spoken more than you have.
People who are intimidated to start to write. If it's something you really want to do, then you kind of need to do it. And not worry too much about how good it is at first. You're really just working on your craft, and you shouldn't be thinking at the start, you shouldn't be thinking about how good is this? When am I going to get a publishing deal? Should I quit? You should just be thinking about ways that you can improve as a writer.
And, I should say we do get that. We've been teaching writing for quite a while. We do understand that it is intimidating. It's hard. It's hard for those of us who are writing professionally sometimes when you're faced with a big project to get started. So, our writing subjects are designed around often, you won't be asked to just, produce this big, produce a story or produce a novel for us. You might work your way up to that, but we often, so part of your class would involve writing exercises, and it might be just coming up with lists or coming up with response to particular exercises. So that we give students a lot of kind of what I would call 5-finger exercises to sort of practice the skills and even simulate in some of the more unusual genres, like creative there's an end of creative nonfiction, which is my specialty, that kind of is like a combination of the short story and an essay. It's called lyric, the lyric essay, and I give students exercises where they practice some of those kind of poetic elements before they start to put them together. So we really sort of scaffold the learning with that understanding that writing, can be, can be daunting, even for those of us, 4 books in, it can be quite daunting.
I mean, writing is an iterative process, and in these subjects, we take you through some of those early stages in writing a story or an essay.
Perfect. So, Now that we've heard from our panelists, I think what we really want to hear now is what is the graduate certificate program?
So the graduate certificate is really mainly for two types of people: people who want to publish their own work, or people who want to publish the work of others. So maybe you find it's time to get serious about your writing, you'd like to study it formally, you'd like to learn some narrative strategies, maybe you have a project ultimately in mind, then this is a good degree to start off with. Or perhaps you want to change careers, work in publishing, in editing or marketing or publicity. So in the graduate certificate, you're developing skills in writing and editing and publishing. So no matter where you want to end up ultimately within those three coordinates, it helps to know about the other practices, and Jane mentioned that briefly. So if you want to be a writer, knowing something about editing is going to be essential, because that's a key process in the production process of a book. You need to understand editing. You need to know that revision is how you make a piece of writing good. And you need to know about the publishing process too. Publishing can be an opaque industry, and there's so many things that I wish I knew about the industry before I started publishing. So the more you know as a writer about how the publishing world works, the better you can navigate the industry. For people in editorial and publishing, people who want to work in those areas, it's really good. It's important to understand narrative strategies and traditions. So an insight into writing craft will make you a better editor or agent or publisher. Ultimately, everyone in publishing is in the business of storytelling. And then why UTS? Well, you're studying in one of the oldest writing disciplines in Australia. We're always updating our subjects, but we're also drawing on a long tradition of writing at UTS, and our writing degrees have been successful. Every year, 2 or 3 novels or works of narrative non-fiction are published in Australia by writers who began those manuscripts during their time in one of our subjects at UTS, and of course, more graduates are publishing their books every year. So this is a snapshot of the graduate certificate. The degree is designed to be studied in 1 year. So 1 year comprises 2 sessions. Autumn and spring at UTS we call semesters sessions. So there'll be more detail on the individual subjects in a later slide. In autumn, you study professional editing, in which you're trained as an editor, and narrative and creative practices, another writing subject, which delves into narrative techniques for, say, creating good characterization, plot, point of view, among other elements of storytelling. In spring, you study publishing workshop and creative nonfiction workshop. Publishing workshop explores the publishing process, and creative nonfiction is a writing subject that guides students through the many forms of nonfiction that are popular today. I'll also mention that we have some Commonwealth supported places available, which means you don't pay course fees. So please do apply for those Commonwealth supported places.
Yes, so I think Andrew's given a good explanation of the subjects, but Creative Nonfiction Workshop is the subject that I teach at the moment, and it's really exciting to teach because creative nonfiction is booming, and it is such a varied field. Everything from sort of fine personal essays through to quite out there writing, and that is actually commercially we're seeing that same sort of variety of writing that is, there's been some quite popular hits in terms of creative nonfiction that have been that aren't very traditional at all, that are really quite unconventional, that are making big sales at the moment. Narrative and creative practices is designed around an understanding of the storytelling process, and professional editing practice is taught, has been taught this year by my colleague Claire Corbett, who is she's the fiction editor at Overland, which is one of the major Australian journals, and she takes students through the nitty gritty of the editing process, which is also not just about sort of marking up errors in someone's work, but actually really talking about what the golden vision of someone's work is, and it's very much about sort of relationships. So students are also learning, how to write a letter to to an author, how to communicate and exchange knowledge with an author as well. And publishing workshop, well, you've heard from Jane about how that runs, and that's been I've been hearing fantastic word of mouth from the students in that class.
So what can you expect from this course? So in the 2 writing subjects, you will learn techniques from other writers, not just your tutor, but the authors of readings as you unpack their craft and read as writers do. So we use a mix of classic and contemporary readings to demonstrate how writers of fiction deploy certain strategies. And the exercises and assessments in these 2 writing subjects are designed to train students in essential strategies. For writing dialogue, for managing narrative time, for establishing setting. And the exercises and assignments mean that you also acquire a writing portfolio if you're not already building one. In the editing and publishing subjects, you gain practical experience that trains you in authentic skills that you need in the field. In publishing workshop, Jane mentioned the publishing proposal. So those publishing and editing subjects are designed with current professional practice in mind, including the juggling of many roles that publishing professionals do, say marketing and publicity. So publishing jobs, it seems to me, especially in editorial, require a wide range of skills which you develop in courses such as this one. This is the anthology, which we spoke about earlier. How long has the anthology been running, Delia?
We have published our 43rd issue this year, and for the 40th anniversary a few years ago, we published a big bumper edition of the students of the writing that had been published across those anthologies, including writing by authors like Beth Yarp or the late Gillian Mears, who was one of our very revered Australian novelists, who was nominated for the Miles Franklin for her last book, Foal's Bread.
And Gillian was a canonical writer who studied here in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yes, she was very, very shy, and she said she hid for a lot of her degree, but nevertheless, got her great start. So, even great writers again are, can be intimidated by the process to begin with. And I always laugh at that story because, there she was as such a major Australian writer. And, she said that she sort of hid a lot of the time for the first year of her degree.
And this year's anthology was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I read the whole thing. So well done, Amanda, and the whole editorial committee. Please pick it up and have a read. We also have a Writer in Residence program every year. So this year's Writer in Residence is Vivian Pham, novelist. Previously, we've had Nadi Simpson, Christopher Raja, Bree Lee, Christine Piper.
So Christine Piper was an alumni of UTS, and she won the many of you will know that the Australian Vogels Literary Award is the novel for the best first novel by a young author. It used to be under 35. I think it's maybe under 40 now. And so so Christine wrote a beautiful novel, After Darkness, that won that award, and she ended up coming back and being a writer in residence. And Vivian Pham had astonishing success. I think she published her first novel at 21, Coconut Children. So, and the writers in residence, come, and this is a great project where we have copyright agency sponsorship, and we contribute to the writing community in that way, in that we host a writer with an office and university resources to work on that notoriously difficult second or third book, and at the same time part of their contract is to be available for student consultations and to come in and make guest visits to classes as well. So we are hoping that fund, we've been funded every year, so we're hoping that continues again. And Nadi Simpson's book that she wrote, Bellbird, has just come out, and she's had blinding success as an author, in the year that she was with us, and also since, and this new novel, Bellbird, I think is going to be very big as well.
And the UTS staff.
So here we are. Graham Akehurst's, he sits across CAKE, which is the Centre for Advancement of Indigenous Knowledges and Writing, and his young adult novel he's been disappearing to various writers' festivals as a very popular guest all over the country. He's about to go to Singapore with this novel, which is YA meets fantasy, meets what he calls Indigenous realism, meets critique of fracking, and so it's a wild ride. It's a fantastic novel. Sarah is a widely published poet. As I said, Claire's on retreat at the moment. She's been very successful. She's on study leave, coming back next year, and is a board member of Aruna, the Writers' House, which is a residential a writers' centre in Katoomba, New South Wales, which runs a huge number of programs for younger writers as well. So we have that lovely connection there. Graham's also on the board of Aruna. There's me and there's Andrew, and we've spoken about our work as well. Enough, I think, for tonight.
Some recently published student works.
Yes. So am I speaking to this one, or are you?
You can speak to this.
So the Calibre Essay Prize is the biggest essay prize in Australia. In fact, people enter internationally. It's run by the Australian Book Review. I think they have something like 800 entries. It's huge. And Tracy Ellis, who's a graduate, began her essay, and I said, I think this is one for the Calibre Essay Prize. I think you should enter it at some point. And then a couple of years, she a couple of years later, she entered it and won. She also took out the Australian Book Review Calibre Short Story Prize in the last few years as well, so which is the biggest short story prize in Australia. Cameron Stewart's novel, Why Do Horses Run, has just come out. Who's the publisher of that one, Andrew?
Allen and Unwin.
Allen and Unwin.
I remember seeing the early chapters of that novel in a class at UTS.
Sydney Koo's novel, Sydney, also started their novel, The Spider and Her Demons here. That just won the Queensland Literary Awards YA category. And Nadine Cohen's book, Everyone and Everything, which she also began in the degree, which is set at the McIvors Women's Baths, was Booktopia's, so our major online booksellers' book of the year, of fiction or non-fiction, debut of the year. So that's just and Brendan Atkins' book, The Naturalist, was a history of the very charismatic and very interesting man who used to head the Australian Australian Museum was published by New South Press. So, fiction and non-fiction successes. And, there'd probably be, maybe 2 to 3 books that come out a year, as well as out of the programs, as well as, sort of the many shorter pieces that students have been publishing. So we're very, very proud of our students here.
Admission requirements. So the application deadlines for Commonwealth supported places. The first round is Sunday, 24th of November, and round 2, Sunday, 12th of January next year. So applicants must have completed a UTS recognized bachelor's degree or an equivalent higher qualification or above. If you don't have a higher education qualification, you can still apply with verifiable professional creative experience in the field, with an updated CV, a personal statement, and a writing portfolio of no more than 3,000 words. And those are the fees.
Thank you so much for that detailed overview of the subjects. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the UTS anthology has gone for 40 years now, which, if my maths is correct, is older than the university itself. So there's really been such a rich and long history of talented writers coming in and out through the universities over the past 4 decades, really. So thank you to all our guest speakers for sharing their insights with us so far. We're going to open the session now for the audience Q&A. And also for all the online attendees, please send your questions through the Q&A function, and we'll start taking questions now.
What interested me the most is the feedback from people like you. So will I be writing, and you will be, and experts will be checking that writing and giving feedback?
You would be bringing work in, you would be doing writing exercises in class and getting feedback on those. You would be bringing work in for workshops for the process that Amanda's explained. So, sometimes that can just be a few lines, and sometimes that's more substantial work. And you would be getting feedback from your classmates as well as from your teacher. And that's really important, because part of the writing process is critiquing others' work is actually, sometimes the most the most effective way of learning how to write yourself. So, and then you would each of these subjects has 2 assignments, and you'd be getting the teacher's feedback on the assignment as well.
Now, question from our online audience. My impression is that there is going to be a lot of change over the next couple of years in the publishing and writing industry. What are some of the emerging skills do you think will be essential for graduates in writing, editing, and publishing?
That's a hard question. We're seeing changes across all aspects of the publishing industry. And it's a little bit hard to predict where some of those changes are going to take us. Obviously at the moment, everybody is talking about AI and what the impact of that might be on the industry. I don't personally think we're at a stage where AI is good enough to make fundamental changes to the industry, but who knows in 18 months, I think, publicity always changes. It's constantly changing. That's probably the most rapidly changing part of the industry, because there are always new platforms. There are always new ways to reach an audience. Some of the skills stay the same, like the fundamental, we use different technologies for editing, but the fundamentals of good editing haven't really changed. Styles change, and what the readership has an appetite for changes, and obviously editing then has to change in response to that. But the techniques of the editor are more or less a constant. So I think the main thing is just to be learning all the time if you want to work in the industry.
And it's hard to predict. Do you know that the area of publishing that boomed during COVID was audiobooks. I recorded my book with a small producer during lockdown, and they said they could not keep up with the demand. So, the thing is to have that industry interface where you are, in the mix, where you're flexible, and you are connected to industry, so you can kind of, you can be, you can understand changes and be on top of those changes as they come along. The other thing I'd say as a writer is that it's not going to change that writers need to be able to articulate what we do, increasingly well, whether that is, a significant part of writers' incomes these days is actually talking at writers' festivals, or children's authors, often make a really large part of their living by, visiting schools and so on. So, and we need to advocate for ourselves as writers as well within the business. So having the ability, part of what the workshopping process does and the learning experience here, and the classroom experience, is that you have to, be able to respond to feedback, to be able to articulate what your vision of your work is, and to be able to talk about yourself and about work and others' work within the industry. That is probably the most fundamental skill that I think you can take out into the industry.
That's such a good point about audiobooks, because some estimates say they're now 15% of the market, which is phenomenal,
And, there's work producing audiobooks. My producer was fantastic. I thought, that's a really interesting job I hadn't even thought of in the publishing industry.
In terms of like going into industry, potentially in more publishing editorial side of things straight after the course or kind of as a graduate, what roles are people looking at? Like editorial assistant roles? Is production a big thing in Australia? I mean, like physical book production. And as you were saying at the beginning, with the kind of job market in Australian publishing, and the number of graduates kind of thing, I feel like maybe that's a concern coming out. So I just wondered if you had any advice or insight into kind of approaching that.
Yes, I do. Volunteer, volunteer, and volunteer. So we have had some of our students who've been successful going into industry have volunteered for the Sydney Writers' Festival. They've volunteered for the Rose Scott Women's Writers' Festival, which we have good connections with, and those making sure that they are, they've volunteered for or become part of the editorial collective for VoiceWorks, which is the magazine for writers under 25, and all. So they're the graduates that I have to say are the ones who most get the foothold, or they've become really good at sort of other skills like spreadsheets or design. So because the publishers that we spoke to said, look, the more multi-skilled someone is, so don't, the more interesting they are to us, and we really value their writing and reading skills. But I think that the more you can get yourself out there, even be communicating, be part of the conversation on social media, all those things are the things that are giving people a step up, and where we're seeing people succeed most.
I would agree with everything Delia just said, but also think about related jobs like working in a bookshop. If you work in a bookshop, you get a really good sense of what readers buy and why they buy it. And that's an incredibly useful bit of knowledge to bring into a publishing house.
I've got a question over here.
It wasn't really a question, it was going to be a comment, because I'm also a student who's about to finish. But I did want to say that Delia and the staff are really good at letting students know when there are opportunities to volunteer. So that's something to keep in mind as well, because it's not just them saying you should do this, but they actually help you with opportunities.
Well, after the whole discussion, I think what I gathered is practical things are very, very kind of taken care in the course. But I would like to ask somebody who has done an undergraduation in English literature, how will this course be still, useful to that person if she's really thinking of, going forward with her writing, or it'll be some kind of unnecessary, or it will add on to somebody in the course, because she's already done the course, she's already been exposed to various literature and writing. So how this is going to be adding on to her thing and help her as an author?
Look, I think that generally I would say about education is that we're always learning, and the sort of the more I have studied, and I have PhD in cultural studies, the more I know that I don't know, and knowing what you don't know is actually, and unlearning some things you think you know are big parts of I think the central core fundamental aspects of education. But the connections that you would make with other students who love writing and love talking about writing. A lot of our students, continue to have writing groups that extend beyond the university. And also, I suppose the thing that we didn't say is very much is that we read a lot as well. So, and that's fundamental to to writing. And we encourage students to read. Part of each week would be responding to, we try to give students diversity in terms of authors and in terms of subject matter and generic approaches, but we also try to give students as much as we can a sort of a historical depth. So that's the aim with the sort of the reading we teach you, and the idea is that that we model that, and then students can take again that understanding of there's always something more to learn, there's always something more to read, but to be able to understand what that is, and set yourself, sort of to set goals for yourself and to keep learning is actually what we hope you go away with.
Sometimes every new piece of writing requires new skills as well. As Delia says, you're always learning as a writer. It's perhaps there's some level of mastery that you reach after 8, 9, 10 books. But as a student writer, you really there's a lot to learn about making a character come alive, managing time in a piece of narrative.
Got another online question, and this one's for Amanda, actually. I think something that we might all be curious about before entering is, what is the workload like, and how do you manage the balance between work and study?
Well, I think the workload is what you would expect it to be going into a university degree. So yeah, it's a lot of work, and I struggled a little bit in my first semester. It had been 10 years since I'd been at uni. I think the best thing that I did, that I had to learn over the first couple of semesters, was start early. Start earlier than you think you need to start, and then maybe even a little bit earlier than that. The thing about the course, and I guess life in general, is you get out what you put in. And I don't mean just with time, but like the attention and care that you put into what you're doing. And so I think Andrew and Delia were just talking about the weekly readings. So it's very easy to, if you get inundated and you're running behind on work, you can quite easily skip those. But I would say that's to your detriment, because that's where you learn the most, and you bring your own insights, and you listen to the insights of others. And if you haven't read the reading, then you don't know what's going on. So yeah, I think just like start early and just really pour yourself into it.
We have a question from our online crowd. Again, a follow-up to the last one. Give a ballpark answer. How much time would you dedicate to the degree each week for your studies?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer. I think I tend to be a slower writer. I've had many days where I've looked at a screen and my word count's gone down after 3 hours. If I had to pick a number off the top of my head, it could be like 15 hours in total, maybe. Again, it really depends on how much time you want to spend writing or reading, because it's not really, there's no clear endpoint a lot of the time. You decide that. So I think it's pretty flexible as well.
Thank you.
Fantastic. We're on to our last question. We've already discussed the most significant transformations currently occurring in writing, editing, and publishing in Australia. Do you guys have one final advice, and keep it in one sentence?
Keep going.
Keep reading and support Australian books.
I was going to say read too, because whether you want to be a writer or a publisher, you've got to be a reader. But I would also say be a good literary citizen, whether you want to be a writer or a publisher. Behave decently with other people, read other people's work, support other people's work. If you can't afford to buy books, borrow them from the library. If you're on social media, talk about other people's writing as well as your own. And you will be rejected. Everybody is. Take that gracefully.
One sentence, don't rush, writing is a long game. Footnote, publishing is a great industry.
Thank you so much for that. That actually comes to the conclusion of tonight's event. Thank you so much to our guest speakers for coming in,
Thank you.
taking the time out, and giving us your insights. It's honestly truly been such an insightful event tonight. And thank you to everyone here that came out as well. I'm sure this is something that you're all very passionate about. And so I actually welcome you all to stay behind to partake with the complimentary refreshments and to network a little bit with our guests as well. For everyone on the online, sorry, unfortunately you can't join us today, but thank you again for attending with us. And again, I just want to remind everyone that the applications are open for the graduate certificate program for this February 17th intake. You can also get more information through the QR code, if I can get it up. And we'd also like to get your feedback as well. So the submissions are through the UTS student portal. So if you're a current student as well, you can also have a one-on-one consultation as well. That's all through the QR code. So thank you again for all coming, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.